Yo, what's going on, man?
Yo, what's up, man? Good to see you, family.
You too. Well, everybody, welcome. We are the Rap Geeks. This is Sean.
Rap Geeks, baby. Lizzie.
All right, so today we're going to be getting into it. Today's album that we're going to be dissecting is Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. As you guys know, as of the
PE,
recording
baby.
of today, this is the 30-year anniversary of the album. And on top of that, some of you might know that Public Enemy just released a new album a couple weeks ago. Very interesting times for the band, being that they just fired Flava Flav from the band. And so Public Enemy, they're a New York-based hip-hop group. They've been around for quite a while, even back to the 80s. They're kind of known as the group that was probably the most politically charged as far as when hip hop was getting more into the mainstream around the early 90s. And this album is considered by many to be, their some of their finest work, so to speak.
Yeah. True. True shit, man. So what are your thoughts, man? What's on your mind?
So the first thing is, did you know that at one point this was Def Jam's top selling record of all time?
I believe it. I truly believe it, man. Thinking about everything that was going on around that time. It was pretty early. It's still pretty fucking early.
Right. And as you listen to the album, despite the fact that it was released such a long time ago, 30 years ago, it's crazy how the album, a lot of the stuff that's spoken on the album, although it's not to the level of, in modern day, is not to the level of the types of lyrical content that was spoken at 1990. It's still, there's a lot of it that's still relevant today.
Yeah, no, as I was listening to it, man, sonically, obviously it's a little dated, but if you were to just read the lyrics, it's timeless. There's still a lot of relevant things going on.
Right. And so the album starts off with the song called Contract on the World Love Jam. And I think it kind of throws you into what the album's going to be like. It's really comprised of just a bunch of different samples going on. And then it's mainly a lot of media reaction to Public Enemy. So in some ways, they were using pretty smart, guerrilla type marketing to put themselves out that they are a controversial group at that era of hip hop.
Yeah, no, I do think they definitely used the controversy on them as content for the a lot of the messages that they were talking about on the album itself. A lot of sampling from actual news stations talking about them, included in the whole mix of samples that they use.
Right. And so the first kind of official track of the album, it really does have a very strong start to it with the song called Brother's Gonna Work It Out. And it's a reference to Willie Hutch, almost like a tribute to the song that he made back, I believe, in the 1970s. And talking about samples, something Public Enemy does so much is they actually sampled themselves. So out of the 12 samples used within this track, 3 of them were just their own music, like Don't Believe the Hype or Bring the Noise. And I haven't really thought of too many people that do that as far as always constantly sampling their own music. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. Here we go again.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, stuff like that, dude. I love that,
Right.
man.
The album after.
No, that
Go ahead.
no that song was a good start following the instrumental that preceded it. Fucking Chuck's rap the sets the tone heavy for the raps that he's gonna be coming with later on. But the beat is a pretty simple. It's a pretty simple beat. But I did appreciate the psychedelic guitars going on in the background. I don't know if people were sampling a lot of music like that back then, but I think it added a really great texture to it.
Right. And, right after Chuck D kind of does his monologue on Brother's Gonna Work It Out, it goes straight into 911 is a joke. And that is a Flava Flav solo. And what's really interesting about this track is the way that it really is a representation of the album, because there's some really funky, lighthearted jams going on, but on top of that, it's overlaid with like very serious political, lyrical dispositions going on. So,
Yeah.
it's like it's a very catchy song. Like, you can bob your head to it, you can kind of even dance to it, but the lyrics are just so inappropriate for something like for this to be played at like a high school prom setting, because they're so impactful. The Flava Flav is speaking specifically about how emergency hotlines do not respond to, minority communities.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing that you just said is pretty constant throughout the whole album. If you can listen to the background, what's happening in the background, they tend to have so much ambient sounds, whether it be a whole crowd, whether it be a train, or just regular shit you'll hear just growing up in New York. And I really think that even with a song like 911 is a joke, they they make music like that to really to perform it live to their people. I think they really talk to their people with this album, and 911 is a joke. I think a song like that is a lighthearted track that talks about real shit that goes on in their community.
Right. And going past this song, I think this was kind of a point in the album where I really understood the genius of the Bomb Squad, which is the production team behind this, which actually is comprised of several members of Public Enemy as well, is when the track goes to Incident at 99.9 FM. And it's a live recorded interview from WNBC where...
Isn't it 66.6?
Is it 66.6 or 99.9?
I think it's 66.6.
Hey, man, you might be right. So it's 66.6 FM on WNBC in New York. And the track is, they're having some guest callers calling in, talking about the abrasiveness of Public Enemy's music and how it's horrendous, and they went to see him live. And then you have I believe members of Public Enemy calling into the station saying like, you white liberals do not understand what Chuck D is talking about because you're not part of this, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. They talk about one thing. I think one theme that I hear throughout the album, and including this particular, what do you call it, interlude, is there's a lot of, they do talk about hypocrisy, and I do feel a lot of hypocrisy in a lot of the complaints that you're hearing from the white liberal crowd of the time. And especially they specifically talk about something about, this guy, he went to a show, he saw them open up for, I think it was the Beastie Boys.
Right.
And then he was complaining about how he saw a dude, on stage with a Uzi of some sort.
Fake Uzis,
but it's like, yeah, exactly. And it's not like we don't watch, theaters or any kind of action movie or anything like that. But I think it shows a lot of the fear that people like that caller had at the time. I mean, just if you see a gun, that's cool. You see a gun on Clint Eastwood, that's cool. That's a hero. But you see a gun on a black dude from New York, you feel that fear, and you can hear that in his voice, I think.
Right. And it transitions towards, maybe the second biggest hit of the album, a song that really pulls you in, which is Welcome to the Terrordome. One of, in my opinion, the highlights of the album. And the song Welcome to the Terrordome is a reference to the 1989 Virginia Beach riots where Yusuf Hawkins was murdered. Mm-hmm. But what was your opinion just on the sonics of this song? Because, this song, it does kind of hit you off the bat, and there's just so much going on in the song.
Yeah. So at this point in the album, I'm really starting to believe that this album is meant to riot to.
Right.
This album is meant to rally the troops. And it even starts off from the first and second track, man. It's like, again, just going back to how they're specifically using this album to talk to their people. Like it legit is a message to their people at that particular time. Hey, here's what's going on, bro. This is what the fuck we're going through. And the samples that they use mixed with this ambient noises that they have, I think the reason why they sample crowds and parties going on in the background is to maybe create a sense of commotion is happening. And with Welcome to the Terrordome, you fucking feel that.
Right.
You feel that with all of the sonics and the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So I mess with this track heavy because of that.
Right, definitely one of the key highlights of the album, and I would say the next song, Pollywanacraka, it's where you start to realize that Public Enemy, although their theme is on systematic racism and on black oppression, that they're able to tackle issues that are actually not even caused by systematic racism, that are intra issues within the black community. So like Pollywanacraka is a song that talks about interracial dating and how many black men will prefer to date white women because they want to be accepted, they want to be matriculated into a more accepted society, and then on top of that, black women dating white men because they have more means, they have more ends, they have more financial resources. And so kind of controversial to talk about something like that right now, just because I think we're in an era of 2020 where interracial dating really, it's not considered racist for me to date someone not of my own color. But at that time, there was really a message to be sent to the black community in regards to kind of stick with your own, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think going back to another thing that I mentioned earlier, just about even in that topic, I do feel there is a hint of there's some hypocrisy going on within the community. Mm-hmm. It's like, for the females, they want to do that's able to provide this and that, but also at the same time, I mean, the black man is being, shut down by the society itself. So it's like, but then when the black man comes out of a hood environment, then he's looking for more, and that's the complaint on the female side. And so it's a really interesting back and forth that seems to be really affected by what's happening externally outside of the black community.
Right.
And it was an interesting. Yeah.
Even though the song isn't by any means one of my favorites on the record, it's an interesting idea. So like I remember listening to an interview with Kanye West where he says he professes that his favorite porn is black men on white women. I don't know if there's like a particular name for that, but he says that's his favorite porn to watch because it's such a flip on the script of dominance, of power, right? Of specifically in regards to American history, is like, look at this black man who is now able to basically, fornicate white women, the women of the white race, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Jesus.
Right. And so after this, the next song is another interesting track. It's called we're gonna say the PG version, which is just Anti-Nigger Machine. And so the song it's just 2 minutes of samples, of different things like police sirens and gunshots and airplanes. And then Chuck D just goes in and rips the track's head off. Probably some of the most angry rapping that you hear from Chuck D throughout the whole entire album.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree, man. There was a lot of, that was a lot of things he discussed on there, and honestly, it's like we can't even relate to it just from who we are and where we're from. Right. But you really feel it. You feel it in the song, man.
Right. And in regards to why they would use the N-word as a title track, as a word on the actual track name. It's because it's so much more eye-catching when the song is called Anti-N-word Machine. Just like how when NWA came up with F the Police, that track really captivates your attention because it's so vulgar,
Yeah. I actually thinking about it right now, there's the naming of each of the tracks, I think were done very well on this album.
Right,
Actually,
right.
they both speak to the actual song, and they each of them is provocative in their own way. So yeah, no, I just realized that now. I appreciate that.
Right. The song after this is interestingly enough, it's called Burn Hollywood Burn. And the track features it's the only track with features, and it features two pretty big heavyweights within hip hop at that era, which was Big Daddy Kane and Ice Cube. This was a time when it was much harder to be able to have a rapper come, like, you can't have someone send you files through the cloud and for you to have a USB. There wasn't even a USB you could mail to someone.
Yeah.
That they had to physically probably be in the same building in order to capture a feature. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. And if anything, rappers of their caliber at the time, I mean, these guys aren't new, right?
Right.
We're talking Big Daddy Kane, Ice Cube, and this is post Fuck the Police.
Right.
So they, at the time, if they were to record this session now, they would be passing around SSDs that are encrypted heavy. You know what I mean? If they had to do that. But I do think they had to have this session. Might have been in New York, I would think.
Right. I know the album was recorded in three different studios. The main one being probably in New York City, where Public Enemy is from. And the song.
But one thing.
Go ahead.
No, one thing though about this particular song is it's funny that they have Ice Cube on it. I mean, I don't know when his movie career started to really take off, but I do think at this time I'm sure I've heard a couple stories on some interviews from older rappers that were interacted with Ice Cube around that time, and I think he's always had plans to be a movie star, or even be a director.
Right. The reason why there's a comical element to the song is because the song is about the exploitation of African Americans within film and television, where there's even, I believe, a section where the person. The narrator of the song is speaking to Flava Flav and asking him to take a role, and he says, a controversial role, and Flava Flav says, "Oh, I would love to play Huey Newton within a film," and he says, "Well, we're thinking of something that's a little bit more meek," and so it's the song's almost like a homage to the blaxploitation era of films where African Americans held roles like the hero, and they were the main subject, other than where at that time, if you were a black actor, you were more likely to have a role as a servant or a sidekick or even a slave. And so the funny thing is that this song being a song released in 1990, and Ice Cube's career kind of I guess his acting career started really growing over a decade later. But he starts taking these roles as like a family man, and more, not as I guess like a badass role as the way that this song probably intended African Americans to kind of take. One thing with the song after this, "Power to the People," I want to bring up is that the TR-808 is used pretty heavily throughout this album, and there is a lot of influence coming in from Miami bass. Like a lot of these instrumentals, although the overlays are a little bit too dark, I could see Uncle Luke, I could see 2 Live Crew rapping on some of this.
Yeah, I feel that, and I wonder what you think about this comparison, but I had somewhat of a similar sentiment to that, but I felt a lot more Africa Bambaataa, Planet Rock vibes, and so I don't know how close Miami bass is to that genre of, I would call it, b-boy hip hop, sort of electronic. You know what I mean? Technically. But yeah, I feel exactly what you're talking about.
Right. The song transitions to the next track, which is "Fear of a Black Planet," and it's the song that they choose to name the album after. The song is about America's fear of African Americans becoming a bigger part of society. So almost a fear of black excellence. And the song is probably one of the most deeply Afrocentric songs within the album, in a very Afrocentric album, reminding the listener that a lot of cultural significance and a lot of all of our ancestries stem from Africa. And even though it's an Afrocentric type of album, it's an aggressively Afrocentric album. So it's not so much the Martin Luther King. It's way more the Stokely Carmichael, the Malcolm X. This album has a CTA. It has a call to action. It wants you to revolt. It wants you to be part of the revolution.
Yep. Yeah, I wonder though, why didn't they start the album off with this song? Do you think that was do you think they should have, or do you think it was placed in the right spot?
It's interesting. I don't think that this is a strong song within the context of the whole album, and I even think that the first half of the album is stronger than the second half of the album. And as you get into some of those deeper cuts within the second half of the album's 20 songs, the last 10, there's really only a few that for me have that playback value, and this is not one of them in my opinion, but it is a good. It once again, what Public Enemy doesn't, although they're not the most listenable, the songs that don't have that much listen value, they're lyrically very well structured and they're lyrically very well represented.
Yeah, I heavily agree with that, man. I mean, again, the lyrics on this album is timeless.
Right. And speaking of which, lyrically, the next song, "Revolutionary Generation," is a very interesting song because other than like Tupac or Kendrick Lamar, it's a song where talking about the African American community's poor treatment of black women. And once again, it goes to show just how much of a Swiss Army knife Public Enemy is in terms of being able to look at a topic and tackle it from so many different angles. It's not just we need to revolt. It's also we need to change, our communities need to change themselves as well.
Yeah, as unapologetically black this album is,
Right.
I think it's very powerful that they bring up these hypocrisies and all of these deficiencies that are happening within the culture, because it's something to talk about. And again, like, I mean, especially if this album is hey, let's rally to it. You know what I mean? Hey, let's also work through these issues together. We have to, because no one else is going to do it for us.
Yeah, and that's perfectly encapsulated in the next song. Is almost the opposite. It's the apathy side of the song's called "Can't Do Nothing for You, Man," and it's another Flavor Flav solo where it does represent the helplessness of African American community in terms of helping one another. And it's almost as if somebody's asking Flavor Flav for help, and he says, "I can't do nothing for you, man."
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love the Flavor Flav contribution to the album as a whole, because there's so much tension in the album, man. Not only in Chuck's voice and his execution, the samples, they create the tension in the music, and then every now and then you'll have Flav come in with some lighthearted shit like this, but also the topic itself is deep.
Right.
And so I appreciate that thing that they added to the album, whether it was intentional or whether it came naturally to all of their personalities. But I love that they really highlighted each of the personalities within the album. It's not like, hey, this whole album needs to be, every song needs to be fight the power.
Right. Right. And
so I'm glad they did that.
Right. And the song after this, the next song I want to talk about, Reggie Jax. It's a reggae song, and it's interesting because it's reggae dubs overlaid with like Chuck D's very echoing rap. They're using that same vocal effect that they use a lot on dub music. Although the song's not great in particular, it is interesting that they might have been one of the first rap groups to really mess around with reggae type effects. And,
Yeah.
especially as you go towards more into the future when you have guys like Modest Yahoo, that they pioneer being a reggae rapper.
Yeah, dude. Throughout this album, I'm just very impressed by how it was engineered. Like, because what you were just saying, they style bend how the song was mixed, you know? Part of me feels like this song was mixed by people who are used to mixing rock music. Um, but somehow it just translated well as a good ass rap album. And I do think we had a conversation about this, but it seems also people who tend to listen to rock more often also mess with Public Enemy, and it may be because of the sonics aren't too far from each other.
Right, right. And it's really it's really showcases, even on the song after "Leave This Off the Charts." It showcases just how talented the Bomb Squad was, and how there really isn't production teams that spend so much time ingrained in the detail of how they want the music to be presented.
Yeah. I was thinking that, dude, it sounds like Public Enemy had complete control over how the song sounded. You hear stories of rappers of that time, Tupac, DMX, on how they would go off on their engineer. These guys don't know what the engineers are really doing, but they just know how they want their music to sound like. And so it really sounded like they had complete control over the textures that are happening off in the background, and even what was happening in the foreground of the music, that be the lyrics and the main samples and rhythms that were going on.
Yeah, and going back to sort of what I call like the CTA of the album, right? The album does end very well. It ends with one track, in particular, B-side Wins Again. There's a lyric where they say there's war at 33 and 1/3, and I thought that was just a very interesting play where they're saying the war takes place on a vinyl record. So what is the war? Well, we know who the enemy is. So, like, we know that the dominant white groups of the time that were controlling the media, radio, television, were viewing the African American diaspora as the enemy. And so the war takes place, although there's no more, there really isn't big public figures that were civil rights activists, because, segregation was either at the tail end or it already had ended. And so it became more systematic, and now it's up to musicians. It's up to the people that are within, black media to really voice their opinion and push the agenda of equality,
Yeah, I like that take. And if I can add to that, to even go back to the song where it's "Leave This Off the Fucking Charts."
Right.
One thing that's interesting, I just thought about this. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think they have explicit messages like that, because imagine if Public Enemy really became commercial. If their music was set for the radio, I truly think that it would lose its credibility in the messages that they were saying. Because, imagine activist types that are also profiting off of the music, right? I do think people wouldn't take, I think people in the soil wouldn't take their music seriously, because it's like, oh, you guys are just pop stars, bro. What do you guys know about what's happening down here? And so I do think they intended to both have a strong message and even let their people know that, hey, we're not doing this music for profit. We're really we're really doing this for us. And here's a song that literally says, hey, leave this off the charts. We don't need it there,
Right.
because this is purely for us. This is just for us.
Right. And the interesting thing about this, the notion of the charts, is that the charts back then, from what I understand, there was no. I don't think there was a hip hop chart. I think
No.
that at the time there was literally a chart called the Black Music Chart, to my understanding, or what's now modernized as urban. Um,
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. I don't know when urban was started, but it probably wasn't that that long ago.
right, right, and this pretty much the album ends with a transition track called, what is it? Final count of the collision between us and the damned, and it goes into the strongest piece of music that Public Enemy has ever created. Truly, arguably, one of the best recorded pieces of music ever made in hip hop, and a song that truly encapsulates the entire album into a single track, maybe even the entire message of Public Enemy, and that's Fight the Power, right?
Yeah.
The song starts off, it's so memorable to remember the Thomas Todd, TNT. He was a civil rights activist talking about that. It's a message that was intended for, what is it, the Vietnam War, but they were able to flip that into the modern war of racial justice. And the song is truly the modern, I guess in 1990, but still till now, is the Malcolm X, is the Minister Farrakhan type of messaging that was available for Black youth to consume, and even more so because the music video is very well done. It was directed by Spike Lee. This track still stands the test of time. I don't know if I would ever play it at a party, so to speak, but people know the song. People know this song regardless if they're even hip hop fans or not, because it is so powerful of a message.
Yeah, I don't know what the cutoff year is for you to not know this song, but I do think it goes well into 95. I think especially if, man, I can really only speak, I've been in the hip hop culture pretty much my whole life. We always hear this song in so many places. I mean, I've heard it both in video games and in Do the Right Thing,
Right.
and so we've always heard this song, but hearing it, at least for me, hearing it in this context of the album, I think it was a great closer. And if I knew that this if I had heard this song within the album first, I would have went nuts, because that track is mean, man.
Yeah, I mean, they were really, it's lyrically mean in that, it talks about, Elvis was a hero to most, fuck John Wayne too. And then,
Yeah. And they bring that bar back twice.
right,
Yeah,
right. Just to super emphasize it, right?
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
what a way to end an album. Well worth the wait. Even as I'm sitting through some of these tracks that were filler and were a little bit mediocre compared to the highlights.
Yep.
The album's theme of like institutional racism and a shift of tone from Eurocentrism towards Afrocentricism made it Def Jam's best-selling album. Russell Simmons even said that, who was the CEO of Def Jam at the time, said he used a very grassroots type campaign to promote the album. It was definitely underground. The irony of all this is that I think Public Enemy is a rap group that is way more of a white consumerist type of, there's just way more white people who listen to Public Enemy than black people. And that's not a knock on the group. I think it's just the album sonically has more of a rock tone to it. It's so fast. It's so brutally fast that it causes listening fatigue a lot of the times. I mean, as you and I were listening to the album, we're like, damn, this thing doesn't ever stop the gas pedal.
Right. And even when it cools down on those interludes, they don't last that long. Then you're right back into the the commotion. You're literally thrown right back into the crowd. But this music is meant to be played loud, and you don't feel it. You don't feel it if you aren't. One thing I noticed was when I was hearing it, I do recommend listening to this album on at least 250 ohm headphones because you can hear all the textures. Like if you've only heard this shit on some AirPods, you're missing a lot of the album. You're missing a lot of the impact, in my opinion. When we were listening to it, I was hearing it on my studio monitors, and man, I swear, like it's a lot cleaner on there. But I mean, imagine hearing it, and we may not never experience this, man. But imagine hearing this at a show, at some fucking, at
At a
some
rally.
regular venue,
Yeah.
yeah, in New York. You know what I mean? And and they got I don't know how they do their sets, but I'm assuming they just have instrumentals. They got the DJ. He's just scratching and then mixing all kinds of stuff on the spot. But then you also have the noise of the crowd going on, and then you got the noise of the crowd that's probably in the track itself, and it just feels like a whole revolution. And I think that was the intention.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of revolution, it's what really helps, and the reason why this album is so timeless, why critics even call this like one of the most significant pieces of hip hop music ever made, is because of Chuck D's ability. He's so thought provoking and he's very intelligent. He's able to truly dissect the black experience leading up to the 1990s, even to people like you and I. We're Asian, right? And
Yeah.
he's able to show it to other race groups, what it's like to
Yeah.
understand a piece of history. And it's almost a not only a return to the 5%ers or the Black Panthers type of revolution, but it's a call to popularizing political revolution as a theme in all of hip hop music going forward into the future.
Yeah, if I can add to that, man, one word, like I literally just thought of one word when I took a second listen to it. And after Fight the Power was over, the first thing I was thinking about is just fucking empathy. This album, yeah, this album for real does a good job of creating, how do you say it? It's, again, we're Asian from California,
Right.
born in 92, born after the fact. But if you feel the way I feel as we're listening to it, man, it really puts you in there, and it's partly because of Chuck, it's partly because of it's Chuck and his lyrics, and it's because of the production and all of the textures that they put into each of the beats. All of that together really made for this album. Is it having like such great empathy? Is that the phrase I'm looking for? But you know what I mean, though.
Right. I don't think that there ever has been an album that's so entrenched in political activism as this album. And I myself I'm not the kind of guy who really enjoys politics in my hip hop, right? Like I don't enjoy cream and sugar in my coffee. So the fact that this album has stood the test of time to be a catalyst towards more political hip hop, being politics being an open subject within rap music is why it's such an important piece of music. And even an argument could be made because of Public Enemy's influence on hip hop. There's been a backlash. There's been a backlash from modern rappers of the 2010s, maybe towards the end, where they said we don't want to make thought-provoking music. We don't want to make critical music. We want to make fun music. And so it is sort of in some ways a breath of fresh air to come back to this and say, wow, there was so much meaning and power behind this piece of art.
It it is interesting though to think about. Well, let's look at what the Def Jam roster was
Right.
at the time. I mean, on Def Jam in the late '80s, I would think who was out there like a LL Cool J type character,
Right.
and in music like that is just I'm a smooth guy. I'm here for the ladies.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know if there was anybody else on that roster that was as politically charged as Public Enemy, and I mean that might have been the appeal to have them on that label, considering what was happening at the time. Maybe that was a choice that they made strategically to have a group like Public Enemy in the mix of these traditional rappers who, I guess some would say that they speak of traditional rap things. You know what I mean? Money, cars, and clothes, and how fly you are.
Right. Well, you got any final points on this?
I one of the biggest takeaways for me for this album, I was thoroughly impressed by the Sonics, man. Just out of any rap album that came out at the time, I'm thoroughly impressed by it. And as you said, the way it sounds, maybe it feels like a rock song. And I don't listen to rock whatsoever, but I appreciated that that's how the album sounded. Mm-hmm. So overall, I feel that obviously the production is outdated. The lyrics are timeless. And I even think the way it was mixed and mastered holds today and probably beats a lot of SoundCloud tracks that are dropping today. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's not an album that I would ever recommend to someone to listen to if they were starting off their hip hop journey or needed something to listen to.
For real.
It's a piece of
time.
Not
even for somebody that started it though.
Right. No, man. No.
Not even some. Nah. So, I would think that for old heads,
right?
And we're kind of, I would think we're old head adjacent.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We're people who do our research on things and go backwards a lot of time, more often than forwards. Right. But you're saying you wouldn't recommend Public Enemy or this album to a newbie?
I would
to a hip hop
newbie.
Novice.
I would maybe recommend three songs. I would just say
Fight
the Power. I would say Fight the Power, 911 is a joke, and Welcome to the Terrordome. I don't think that the rest of the album really, there's any other additional songs that are just not encapsulated within those three songs, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I would disagree with the 911 is a joke. I would just keep it to the Terrordome and Fight the Power.
Right.
And maybe even Brothers Gotta Work It Out. But even then, the current listener doesn't have the attention span and the patience for music like there is on this album.
Right.
Because, not saying that there's any fillers on here, I do think as the album as a whole, each of the songs have to be played in this order. Mm-hmm. For the most part. I'm sure we can move some things around, but you have to hear every song, because I do think each song adds context to the album, and that requires patience. But in order to get that, I do think you're able to empathize with the artists a lot more if you sit with this album. And the new listeners, they're not used to that, man. I mean, there's at least 3 XXXTentacion songs within one of these tracks. You know what I mean? So these songs are about 4 minutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
A little bit over that sometimes, and a lot of these new songs are about 2 minutes. I might have seen a song 1 minute and 40 seconds. You know what I mean? But I do think that would be the challenge for new listeners coming back to this album.
No, wholeheartedly agree, man. So if we want to know what you guys think of the album, and also just, are you in your 20s, are you in your 30s and enjoying this, or are you even, below 20 years old and able to truly enjoy Public Enemy? So let us know your thoughts. Is this an album that you guys go back to a lot of the times? Is this considered a classic, or is it just for you, it's not even a thought as far as whether or not you're going to even spend the time to listen to this? But, Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy, it's legendary. It's there. go check it out if there's a calling for you to do so.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
All right, peace out, guys.
Rap Geeks, baby.
Rap Geeks.
Peace. Fuck yeah.